So, this talk is going to be largely directed at those of you who are familiar with the German system, with Liechtenauer, but any of you studying Fiore, maybe there'll be something cool in here you can grab and take away and tweak. But I put Liechtenauer on there, I'm very specific what I'm talking about here. So I want to talk to you about maybe some of the ways that medieval people organized data when they thought about it, because they did a lot, right? And really, when we're looking at fight books, we're looking at people attempting to codify and organize data when we're talking about Liechtenauer's verse, of course, that would have been originally in a spoken word, but I mean, almost immediately, as we know, people started writing about it. And so they're taking off of this organization and building on that. So the first thing I want to bring to your mind is from 3227A. In there, the dude quotes Aristotle, presumably, and then says that it's in this particular text, which I absolutely cannot pronounce. But 3227A, the author of that, says, hey, Aristotle in this text says this stuff. Of course, it isn't in that text. He got the wrong text of Aristotle. But I mean, that's cool, because the guy that wrote 3227A knew exactly what he was doing all the time. So it's a lot of shade I just threw. So, but he says that oppositions shine brighter when they are put next to each other, right? So this idea that you understand dark by shining a light, you understand light when you are in a dark room, etc., right? That idea. And in this sweet dance book I just picked up from 1455, it's an Italian dance master, who was this Jewish dude who got himself, he ended up converting and got himself knighted, which was pretty cool. But he says almost the same damn thing, right? So this was a common idea, that you're going to be putting opposites together. And in this particular instance, there's even another connection, because the dance master, he lays out 6 elements of dance, right? And then he lays out exercises by which you should practice your dance. And so he says that you should have have people play at a certain time, a certain dance, and you should dance to that. And then they should play at that time, and you should try to dance not on time, right? And then he has you dance trying to be on time, but while the musicians are constantly changing time. And then you should have the musicians constantly change time as you try not to get in time with them, right? And this is what he says about it. Things are better understood once you have attempted the opposite, because the goal is ultimately to be on time, right? I don't know. Seems like there's some overlap with fencing. Maybe. So when medieval people are talking about their information, their data that they're trying to deal with, how did they visually represent these things? And there's a lot of ways, but let's kind of sum it up. So number one is the idea of a tree, which I'm going to show you an example of in a moment. Medieval trees could have been like a family tree or an if-then sort of tree that branches out, and if you follow one branch, you go to one end. But very often, they were more conceptual, where they were put there for you to consider relationships and to analyze certain pieces and what their relationship was. So are these things similar? Are they opposite? Right? Etc., which is why I started with the opposites. Then there was this idea of spinning plates, is what it gets called. And if you're going into medieval literature trying to look for this, this is often how it's talked about. And so if you imagined that you had concentric circles that were actually plates stacked upon one another, and you can rotate each piece individually. I'll show you one in a minute. But so that you could have different information on each of these pieces and align them in whatever way you want. And then there was, all kinds of crazy complex designs that were building on these ideas. But again, very often you're looking for spatial relationships, and that was how you would analyze these things across from each other, things above each other, right? Things inside each other. Okay. So this is a couple trees. I like this one just because it's super clear. So these are trees trying to represent the 7 vices and the 7 virtues. Okay? So we know this is the virtues because all of the branches are going up towards heaven. And we know this is the vices, even though we can't read the Latin, because everything's going down towards hell, right? And you see that each of these has a base, like the tree is growing out of a vase here at the bottom, and in here it says that, humility is the root of the virtues, and pride is the root of the vices, right? And then as you go up these trees, you're moving closer to heaven or closer to hell, and so you could see that the closer you get to heaven, the more charitable you are. Like, this was the most important one. And so you can take these trees and you can compare them across each other, and these were in facing pages inside the book that they're from, okay? So hopefully that gets you an idea of it. Another thing you'll do, which is particularly obvious on this one, again, why I like it, is because 7, yeah, that's a really cool magical number, but if you're going to start making comparisons across it, it's more helpful to look at it as 4 and 3, which are also very important numbers for a whole lot of reasons. But 4 and 3 are very easy to analyze, whereas 7 is kind of weird. It's kind of a lot. It's almost too much to really get into. And medieval people would do this all the time. So this could be 3 pairs with something, an outlier, right? Is maybe another way to look at it. Cool. So there's our spinning plates. This particular manuscript, they did this kind of frequently. They actually stacked up pieces of paper or pieces of parchment so you could actually spin them. And get different relationships and different data out of it. And so, but you'll often see, or you will also see, that they'll just draw these pieces stacked upon one another, and you're required to use your imagination to manipulate them, right? And so when you see concentric circles that have information written in them, maybe start to consider that the author of that or the person that designed that is intending for you to turn these around. And that while you might see a relationship obviously there in the way it's aligned, it may not mean that it has to be aligned in that way. But again, this is going to depend on your text. And often you could take information from a tree and dump it in one of these concentric circle diagrams and back, right? And so you'd see the same information presented both ways depending on what version of the text you're looking at. And then, of course, medievalists in the room, there are other more complex designs, and this is totally just a depiction of heaven. Yeah. It is nothing weird at all. Just don't think about it too much. But this is Hildegard von Bingen, who had a lot of very interesting fantasy moments when she thought about heaven. This was the image that came to her. Yeah, there's a lot there. But she has written out explanations for every little piece of all of that and what it all means, right? It's not just a picture.
Are those sea creatures?
It could be all kinds of things. These are supposed to be the winds, is what these guys are. These are winds. What's in there, I don't know. Oh, yeah, it's really going to be.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay, it's not your fault. So if we're going to look at Liechtenauer and we're going to define some elements that we could build our structure out of, if we're going to build a tree or spinning plates, it doesn't really matter. What might we use? And so the first thing that comes to my mind is breaking it up by the 17 Hauptstücke, right? Because, the guy gives us this is the list of the important elements. Cool, thanks, he gave us that. Which are made up of 5 Meisterhau and 12 Hauptstücke, which just means, chief techniques. So why 5 and 12? over here, this is a drawing from Dürer. He took a 12-sided die and unfolded it, right? But a 12-sided die has 12 sides, and each of those sides has 5 edges, right? So the combination of 12 and 5, being in this geometric form, would have been completely known. It's one of the Platonic solids. It's a big deal to medieval people. So if you're ever like, gee, it feels like he could have made some other choices regarding how many of these things he chose to name, that's probably why. It's called a dodecahedron if you care. So 5 Meisterhau. 5, also an important number for a whole lot of reason. But really, it's easier to look at if you say the 5 Meisterhau are made up of 4 Versetzen plus, Sornhau, right? So, again, this is coming from when you're analyzing this data. What's the best way that I can get pairs and start looking at them and 5, we have 4 limbs and 1 head, right? These are just the way they would have glanced and known. So, audience participation. We have here our 4 guards. And when we start to analyze these guards, we can begin by going, okay, like this is from the Von Danzig, the pseudo Von Danzig manuscript. And this is the only thing that's drawn on there. I mean, other than one other drawing that we'll see in a minute. So, why is this so important, and why is it drawn this way? Which also shows up everywhere, right? The guards are always this way. Why? So what do you guys think? Like, if you're looking at this, like, what do you see about qualities?
Parallel blades.
What's that?
Parallel blades on the left one.
Yeah, right? Yeah, the blades are both point at the person across.
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and say that the plow hangs from the earth, the ox hangs from the heavens.
Sure, yeah.
They're paired opposites.
Yeah,
They're paired opposites. They're paired opposites. Are they also both on both sides of the body?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And they're not drawn that way here, but we know that about them. And do we use them in conjunction with each other? Like winding between one or the other, back and forth, all around, right?
No, probably not.
What about those guys over there?
Pointing towards heaven and earth.
Right? Pointing towards heaven and earth?
I'm going to point out the colors.
Yeah? We have cool stuff with the colors. We can here's your moment for elements.
Yeah.
So good. Right? Yeah, so if you look at these guys, right? We have one guy that's red and one guy that's brown, ochre, right? Whatever that color is. But over here, the guys are mixed,
And opposite.
right? And opposites, right? Because these are the guards that are mutable, that you can change between one and the other. And these guards don't mutate. They're only on one side. Arguably, we can argue about Alber if we want, but and so you can kind of see that these guys are similar but opposite, and these guys are similar but opposite, right? Depending on what quality you're analyzing. And so that's kind of part of the way that we're going to continue to approach all of the rest of stuff. There's our outlier, right? The master himself. So those are the 5 people drawn in that entire book. Is why 5? Just, 'cause. So then we can start to go through our Hauptstücke, okay? So those of you that know the stuff know I skipped one, but that's cool. Let's just start here with a pair, because we're going to look at 4 and 1. So Crumpetswehr are a pair. They're the first 2 that are presented. Crumpetswehr as words show up in German poetry together all the time, like we put Chris and Cross together, or to and fro, right?
Is that exactly right? Like, that's a pretty common way of translating.
Yeah,
Crumpetswehr is crisscross.
crisscross. Modern people would.
Chris and Cross.
Yeah, right.
That's cool.
Not that I would say we should
It's not
do that.
identical, but it's something that's done commonly.
Yeah.
People that aren't plugged into the
Yes.
universe of the Zell.
Exactly. exactly. And it's actually super freaking fascinating to get like medieval German poetry that's translated by like actual medievalists and go in there and go like, that's my word. Whoa, we don't call it that. That's my word. Whoa, we don't call it that, right?
Yeah.
But we jargonize things. So anyways, there's our cunning animal up at the top, by the way. I freaking love that the duck is saying quack as it's getting eaten by the fox. It makes me really happy. Quack. So.
He's saying this is whack.
Yeah, right. So anyway, so we see that this Zwerch and Crump come together, right? They're a pair in the world that these people were working in. So, you know, yeah, I just made it up, but also it's true. So, I mean, you know. So here's some of the qualities I've come up with when I think of Krumpau and Zwerchau. And you can, you know, agree or disagree with that. It doesn't really matter, because all I'm looking to do here is to kind of teach you guys how to think about this stuff so that you can make your own analysis, right? I mean, I could be totally wrong. But Crump and Zwerch are short because they're crooked, right? They don't take long point, right? They eventually get there, but that's not in their description of their pathway. And so that's maybe a quality they share, whereas like what they're gonna initially bind with, they don't share, right? In that way, they're opposite, assuming out of the right side, you know. But I found this to be very useful for instance, when you run across, if you're reading through one of the texts and it starts to talk about certain things being short, right? So then you can start to go, oh, okay. So if Durchwechsel works against things that are short, does Durchwechsel work against these? I got hit by some last night, so I'm going to say yeah, right? It's pretty cool. So even though the text doesn't explicitly tell us that this thing will work, we can start to be able to conceptualize in a broader way how all of these things perform, and then therefore use those qualities when they're discussed in the text. I hope you're with me. Mm-hmm. Schiele and Scheitelhau. Before I go to the next page, what do they share?
Vertical.
They're vertical-ish, yeah.
They're long.
I would call them both long. What edge do they primarily use typically in most interpretations? Is it the same edge? No.
Short.
No, right? You guys are there. Also, we get to use Schiele against the buffalo.
Well, that's a dopey looking.
Oh, no, but the best part is he doesn't even stay in the margins.
Right.
Right? He's just completely ungovernable, right? He's just like out. Which I kind of think might have been on purpose. Maybe not, but it makes me laugh.
Yeah.
But Isidore of Seville, you know, was an important guy. If you ever want to go look up, like, what did they think about X, you know, go see what he says.
Long,
like,
especially.
Yeah, he does lots of cool stuff. This is from his etymologies, and I particularly liked, he has this whole thing about wrestling, where he says that wrestling comes from bears and the way that they fight.
Love it.
It's pretty cool. So I ran across a lot of the same ideas you guys were already throwing out. How these have shared and oppositional qualities, and we just continue to find that as we go. You know, Scheitel being a part or a divide, right? And crown, which we use from Olber against Scheitel. Theoretically, some people that are probably doing it wrong do that. And, shade.
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, yeah. But anyways, so just, you know, a crown of a tree, right? Antlers, these are crowns, right? It doesn't have to be a king's crown when you're talking to people about it, right? If you don't want it to be. So we're kind of building up maybe the beginnings of a tree, right? Or it could be a plate. We'll see. So we have Krump, Sver, Schiel, Scheidel, right? So just taking some of the qualities just so that we can map them out, because it's too much to map all at once, though you can keep it all in your head. So Krump and Sver share that they're a short strike. Schiel and Scheidel are a long strike. We said that. We could also pair them this way. We didn't talk about that yet. That's kind of fun, right? So Sver is coming out short, right? Scheidel is coming out long. And they're both wanting a hard oppositional bind. That is what they're in there to do. Whereas Krump and Schiel, at least the way I do them, they meet more obliquely. They're kind of weird in the way that they interact with the other sword, right? Rather than, like stage combatants or something. We can also go crosswise, which is also fun, right? And so you can see that Schiel and Sver both initially come out with the short edge, and those guys come out with the long edge, right? And then, of course, we have Zorn that just frickin' up the middle. Yeah. Right? Does that make sense to everybody? Are you seeing a structure? Right? So I think maybe the pedagogy that we're looking for is that Liechtenauer is saying, hey, we're going to find groups of 5, right, as we keep going. And they maybe work together in a similar manner. So our next set, it's funny what animations worked and what didn't. It's bizarre. So the next set is talking about the Vierlegger, our guards, right, is our next Hauptstücke. And, when you're thinking about lager, think about lager being the resting place of an animal. So that can be a bunny's hidey hole, or maybe a bunny isn't a good fighting animal for your mind. So it could be where a stag lays down in the afternoon, right? Yeah. It is hunting terminology. Yeah, so this comes out of, I may have the book here. It comes out of, Dalby is his last name, I can't remember his first name right now, wrote a dictionary of German medieval hunting terms. It's super, super cool. And lager is one of the things that they talk about in there. And so it is the resting place of the animal. Before it has been started up, before the hunt has occurred, where is it safe and happy and hidden, right? Is a lager, right? A versetzen is when you drive them out of their happy place. So if you're a happy little bunny inside your warren and ferrets go in, I mean, probably traumatizing right now, Fred.
That's pretty cold right there.
But
she's
right.
not here. So
I know.
My daughter, whose bunny was eaten by ferrets just a little while ago.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. But that is what they would do. They would shove ferrets down in the hole to drive the rabbits out. Right. So you can set dogs upon the deer to start them up. You can have fellow huntsmen out beating bushes so that the birds fly up and your hawks nab them out of the air, right? This is for sets, right? That they have been driven out of their hidey hole. So, automatically, maybe you guys already knew that the lager were the guards and the versetzen were the way to break guards, but maybe this hunting terminology gives you another flavor on what to break means, right? Yeah. They're just not happy anymore. They're moving.
Right.
Done. Right? It is broken if they're moving. Done. At least as far as hunting goes. So maybe you guys know that language. Cameron was, both you guys were teaching this today. If you can get people to focus on their upper openings on their arms, then you get to take the legs, right? So this is part of the idea of Überlaufen, or overrunning. And we also have its buddy, Nachreisen. Nachreisen is the chase, the hunt itself, right? So as we were working wrestling today, and of course this applies to swords, I think you guys were seeing that we would either intentionally redirect our partner's attention to one opening and then go to a different one. Depending on exactly how you do that, that can be nutgreisen, right? In my class today, the counter that we learned to the first set of techniques, where you dove your arm over, to me that's a nutgreisen. It felt like a nutgreisen action because I was moving into the space and chasing the way that their arm was already going, right? So this could be done a lot of way with swords. Everybody with me? Yeah, cool. Because I know it's a lot and I know it's going fast, but hopefully we're sticking with it. So you're gonna chase after your openings, and of course, being above the quarry, taking the high ground is where you want to be, right? Whether this is war or hunting or James binding with you, like this is the place that fills you with happiness, right? Is when you're in the higher ground. A more obvious version of that is like the dumb fighter version would be like, I'm gonna cut your leg, and you void your leg and hit me in the face, right? And it's not dumb fighter, but you know what I mean, right? The archetype of that idea is probably that. I think it's important to pause for a moment here and talk for a minute about this little bit of the verse, Proof die Gefährt. So, Gefährt means trail, right? So the trail of the animal, the trail the dog's following, all this stuff. And so a lot of people have maybe taken that to be a different German word and translated it as danger or as bind or threat, right? Attack. Sometimes I've seen it translated as attack, right? But what I'm doing is I'm examining which way is my prey running, right? Which openings are they closing? Which openings are opening, right? And just whether they're soft or hard. And it was actually this line that got me onto all the hunting stuff, all to begin with, because it's repeated. And to me, a repeated bit of verse, I better be paying attention to, because there's only 386 lines or something like that. There's not a lot of lines. So whenever something gets repeated, I need to double check and sit with it. And this was just one that really bothered me. But you see a lot of discussion of the trail, obviously, because when you're hunting, right? Which way the animal's going? Is the animal doubling back? Is it taking to water? Like, what's happening? Being able to predict the animal's motion before it makes the motion is kind of where it's at. Related to Nachreisen, the chase and Überlaufen, and framing the fight above, right, and getting punished below, you see in a number of these medieval German, they're hunting poems. They're poems written about a hunt, but it's an allegory for love, right? For romancing a lady. And we're just going to pretend she's a stag and make that not weird. Or a hawk. The Illyrian's pretty great if you want to read really weird French medieval poetry where all of his girlfriends are birds. That's cool. It's real weird. But pretty neat. There are these constant reminders to watch the trail. Like watch it. Watch what you're doing. Because if you run headlong after the prey, it will escape you. Right? So slow down for a minute. Right? And I think, I know I get punished whenever I fence too fast. Right? Where I haven't actually properly assessed what's happening in the situation because I was too excited about my own thoughts. So I think there's a lot of fun correlation there if it's your jam. So we had our 4, right? We had the Läger, the Versetzen, Nachreisen, and Überlaufen. We have to have a 5th, right? And conveniently, right in here, we get glossed the Ansetzen, right? The setting on in the beginning of the fight. So, I like this image as my mental association for this particular bit of gloss that you should restrict with the point your opponent so that they have much fewer options. And I love that they've driven this boar into this X that he can't escape from, and they're just spearing the crap out of him, right? Might have even fallen in a pit there. But, yeah, that once I have gotten my point in front of your face, you're going to deal. This is on Setsen, right? And so when we set up our little X here, what do you guys see in it? Right? These guys were like opposites. Yeah.
One is static, the other, at least for Setsen and Lager. The Lager are positions of stability, stasis. Mm-hmm. The Versetsens are the things that force them to not be stable.
Yeah.
And force them to move.
I like that one. I haven't thought about that one. What about Nachreisen and Überlaufen? This one we don't have to guess at if you've read your gloss this morning, right? Because we're told that you actually are going to use them together, and that's how you get on Setsen, right? That when you use them together, you can get your point in their face, and that's the best way to do it, right? So taking a high line, or a higher line than they're on, and moving into any time they're retracting their point. That makes sense, right? Rapiers in the room are like, hell yeah, pull your point back. I like it, right? So we're almost there. We're halfway through. Absetzen and Durchwechseln, right? So Absetzen, if this is not fresh in your mind, is you're going to get cut and you're going to move from one guard to another to change it, right? You're going to get a strong bind. You're going to probably thrust in response, probably, right? Or other shit happens. Durchwechseln, right? In its pristine archetypal form, there's no bind at all. You throw out your sword, they try to bind, and you go, no thanks, right? You Kavatseone around the bottom, pop them on the other side, right? So, to me, right there, as I say, Absetzen is wanting to bind, and Durchwechseln's like, nope, 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 nope. Yeah. Zucken and Durchlaufen. Zucken is pulling the sword and returning in with a thrust or a cut or slice, whatever you're returning back in on the other side of the sword. So we've got a sword change, not unlike Durchwechseln, right? But in a different manner. Whereas Durchlaufen is you're going to run through and wrestle, right? So maybe I'm going through with my body. Zucken's going through with my point or with my sword, right? In that way. So this could be here, right? So as I mentioned, these guys are kind of opposed because Absetzen wants to bind, Durchwechseln doesn't, right? Zucken and Durchlaufen are both described as to use against hard opponents, but different kind of hard, right? Different kind of hard. Someone that's looking to that I'm looking to Durchlaufen is going to be hard at me, and somebody that I'm going to Zucken is going to be hard against me, right?
The sword, I think you mean, right?
Probably the sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
If I'm trying to stop him and he's hard against me this way, yeah, Zuckening is not a solid plan.
Yeah. But if he's hew strongly against him, right? That's different than be strong against his sword.
Yeah. Yeah. He's probably hard against the sword, probably.
Yeah. And he's hoping you're going to go like, I'm going to pull my point back now, and then he's like, great, I'm going to stab you.
Sure, right? You gotta. Thank you for setting that up. Yeah, right. I know, because we've got a fifth, right? We haven't talked about yet. But yeah, you've got to Zucken with some discretion. You got to use all of these things with discretion, right? Yeah. If we're going that away, we could say these things both are going through, but one with the point and one with the body, and these things are kind of opposed. You know, it's just a way to look at it, maybe. But the Absetzen is pushing in, and the Zucken is pulling away. Right. In the center of this, we have long point. Long point is what counters all these. right? Stick your point in their face, right? So we've seen Zornhau, which is stick your point in the face after they cut at you. We've seen Onsetzen, which is stick your point in their face before they get to cut at you. And now we've seen Long Point, stick your point in their face anytime they try to do something cool. You're going to see a trend. There's a strong trend here.
Wait, there's 3. Is there a 4th?
There is a 4th.
Oh my God!
I know, right? So we're going to talk about the slicings. We have Abschneiden, which is slicing off the arms, and Händedrücken. This is one of my favorite finds. So the Händedrücken, to drücken is to press, right? So we've called this the pressing of the hands, and that's fine. But it's also the word for literally a wolf trap or a bear trap. That thing. That kind of pressing. That's a different kind of thing. And so they use them for wolf traps. And incidentally, to be a trapper in this manner, a druker, was like, you were the trashiest of trash fighters. Or hunters, right? Like it was not highly regarded, right? And if you were to trap any other animal that way, you could be majorly fined. But you could do it with wolves, but there was nothing to go home and brag about, right? And largely because people could get caught in them. And so it was just seen as not good to do. So maybe, I like to imagine that maybe, in the Saal, all the Liechtenauer, people were fighting and somebody doing it, you'd be like, oh man, you suck, right? That was a really trashy move. I don't know, but I like to imagine there was some trash talk. And certainly if you look at, in one of the later copies of Talhofer, I think it's in the Thought Talhofer, he rewrites the verse, which is fascinating because he keeps a lot of the same rhymes, but he changes the words around. And he has a lot more verse about the Händedrücken and talks specifically about when you don't want to do that, here's how you lay the flat and here's how you get some other things out of it. And I was like, why wouldn't you take it if it's there? I mean, yeah, maybe it was a douche move. I don't know. But it's fun to think about. So the Abschneiden is like slicing off the arms, typically, is the way we talk about it. And it's a little bit punny, depending on what what gloss you're looking at. Because, of course, we have Abschneiden off the sword, which is where our Schnappen comes in. And our, what I think of as Abnehmen from below, right? Because there's all this as above, so below stuff. That particularly comes up in the Nachreisen chapter. But that's a different talk. And then Händedrücken is using the slice.
As above, so below. That you just said that's a big alchemy thing too.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just completely medieval, right? I mean, Talhofer has literal magic. Literal magic in his stuff, right?
And a scuba suit.
What's that?
And a scuba suit.
And a scuba suit. And, I mean, he was a well-rounded kind of guy.
It's fantasy science fiction.
Yeah, right? Exactly. But guys, magic was just a part and parcel of their world. Because the distinction between actual magic and praying in church was very slim. Right? So, it's not a stretch to say alchemical ideas probably apply, considering medieval fight masters put alchemy in their freaking books, right? You don't have to study it if it's not your jam, but I find it interesting at least. So, another talk. So, our last pair is Hängen and Winden, okay? So, there's a lot of things Hängen and Winden could be, but I'm really into the falconry version of it right now. Yeah. So, I mean,
there's the dog one too, but
there's the dog one too, and the horse one. That's cool.
Kids are cool though.
Yeah. So what you want to think about is hängen is to let hang, i.e., Jess's reins, the dog's leash. This is something that is now unconstrained, right? And it's shooting forth, right? And that was that was, and in some of our fight books it says let hang, blah, 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 right? And that also comes up in the hunting text, let hang. And that means the animal,
You go.
yeah,
Yeah.
you go, off. Whereas Vinden, you could wind up a dog's leash, or, again, I set him into the falconry right now. This is when they ring up, when a falcon rings up is the English term. It's when they're spiraling up, watching their prey, and about to come down and pop them.
Wow.
Right? So that's a cool visual, and that ties in with our ideas of Überlaufen, right? And all of that sort of stuff. So, and again, what the gloss tells us is that if we're using this right, we're using hanging and vinden together, right? So this idea of winding and shooting, as they work best together, not one or the other. And this, some of you guys are my Patreons, but so you've seen this, but I just got to geek out about it for just a half a second. So this little bit is in the Nachreisen gloss where it's talking about indes. It's really important. It always gets copied the same. Like a lot of the glosses diverge from each other, but this one is pretty much verbatim in all of them. Nobody messes with it, which tells me it's pretty freaking important how it's written. And he says that you should feel with the word indes on the fist, or some people have translated it in the hand, right? But in the hand is when you're describing a falcon being ready to go, right? It has not yet attacked. You have not yet thrown it or sheathened it, right? You haven't committed the hawk to the actual attack yet, because the attack has not yet come, right? The prey has not yet presented itself. You have not yet felt the trail, right? So, anyways, so when we're talking about indes in the hand or on the fist, it may not be meaning like physically in your sword, though it does, right? Or in your hands through your sword, though it does. I mean, these things are constantly punny. So, thinking about it as you gotta keep your attack ready, but not yet delivered until you know whether they're hard or soft, right? It's more of this watch the trail idea. So, anyways, geeky hunting stuff. All right, so here we are. So our Abschneiden, our slice, and our Händedrücken work together, right? They're a united idea, but one is singular, a slice, or Händedrücken, two slices, right? And through both of our Ochsenflug, right, positions. Our hangers or our winders, or like however you want to think about it, right? Probably not lagers in that case, because you're using it, right? And then the way I conceive of these ideas, you can disagree, but that Hagen is long and extended, and Vinden is short and coiled, right? Because this is what these words imply to me, and it makes sense as far as fencing goes as well. So in that way, those are working together. If we look up and down, Händedrücken and Vinden are both transforming ideas. They're both mixing guards together and moving between them. And, this may or may not be, but Hängen probably is pushing in, and Abschneiden seems to be more often pulling away. So that could be a way to do it. And we have Sprechfenster sitting in the middle of these, right? The most complex and the most artful version of stick your point in their face. So it's progressed from our first set of 5, right, which was our Versetzen or our Meisterhau, right, which are most of the plays, other than when you're using it as a Versetzen, are described from the knock, right? Yeah. So we're going to start by teaching you're not good enough to take the vor. You don't know how to put your point in the face. You're not fast enough. You're not strong enough yet. So here's how to just defend yourself and cover your line, right? Then he teaches us here's how you take the beginning of the fight, and here's how you do that. And then there's like this weird middle place where like, okay, I took the fight, but then he gave me like a freaky parry, or, you know, whatever the situation may be. And we have that middle stuff. And then finally we have here, we're both really freaking good, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to live in this group of 5 now. But if you can think about it on this, and you can place these any ways you want, right? Because this is just teaching you how to make your own diagrams, right? You don't have to accept mine or my conclusions about it. In fact, I'd rather you didn't, because I want somebody to do better than me. But the way I laid it out is on the central circle would be your Meisterhau, then your Zufesten, then your breaking the 4 openings, then your Krieg, right? And so then you can start to manipulate these in space and start to go, oh, okay, this is that play when I turn these dials this way. Yeah? And it's a way to just differently conceptualize what you're reading, you know, because one thing I get asked a lot is, you know, how the hell do you read this thing? It's like a list of 75 actions, like in a paragraph with no periods or commas. Like, I don't even know what it's saying. This helps you to start to break it down for yourself. Or it could, or it doesn't. So this is maybe a way a tree would be, and the screen is the wrong way because the tree is too big. But you see here we have Zornhau down at the bottom, Krumpensfeld, Schielenscheitel, and then we can also have them blocked out here so that you can kind of see that there are the 2 ways to analyze them as we did earlier, right? You can go crossways and get stuff out of them. You can also decide, Jess, I really hate 4 groups of 5. 20 is a stupid number, and I hate everything about that. And instead, I want to look at it as like 4 groups of 4, right? With these outliers. Or I want to look at it as groups of 3, right? And when you do this, and then you do your quality analysis again, you get different insights, right? Which maybe is because humans make shit up and see things that aren't there, or it could be that it's cool. Like, you be the judge, you know. But the point of this is for you to be able to figure out how to analyze this stuff for yourself, rather than trying to keep however many plays are in the book in your head. Because you won't, right? But once you start to understand, every time I go short, I can be durchwechselnd, and this is what short means, and these are the things that are short, then you start to know every time you do these things, the durchwechsel is the risk, and my long point is the counter. So anytime I go short, I better be ready with my long point, because if he starts to dip his point, I need to get back into that center, right? There are other ways to think about that, like chess or like, I don't know, like other sports or whatever. My brain doesn't work that way. This is the quality of the thing, so this happened to work for my brain. It may not work for yours. You can just let your imagination work. All right. So thank you guys very much.
Yeah.